Wyvern have always been a discriminated against minority group in the Republic of Amphine, and even till this day they suffer along with their Kailuran counterparts. Throughout the rule of Freirig, these Sud minorities had faced more and more restriction over time, all culminating into the worst genocide in the delicate history of the Northern Hemisphere, and the worst genocide in Amphine ever. However, these minorities had done no harm to the regime in any way at all and were completely passionate individuals. Thousands of children perished due to deliberate targeting of babies within the Wyvern population specifically. It begs the question, why did Fair's regime hate these people? Take a look at this. In Amphine, there was barely a majority or dominant culture. The nation was so diverse, albeit speaking the same language. Each culture had their own unique identity and stereotype. Wyverns loved to fence, others liked to party and dance. All of them showed vibrant colors and coordinated with each other brilliantly. These lands are inhabited by the Wyverns, and these lands are inhabited by the Amphine, Wyvern, and Serpent. The Amphine, Wyvern, and Serpent were all in cahoots with each other, forming a bond socially known as the AWS. These cultures would be accepted by the regime, the rest being oppressed terribly. You see, the Wyverns were known as thieves, dirty outsiders of society who would occasionally pop up to steal your money, your food, and if you're unlucky, your kids. To the AWS, these people were not human. They did not need to be fed. They were criminals. Millions of criminals need to be controlled. It didn't help that the regime funded this kind of rhetoric, drenching it into the brains of youth and radicalizing them against the Wyvern and Kailuran until after the Amphine War. It all came to a head during the significant year of 1942. The Wyverns and Kylurans were all hit with a surprise. Thousands of AWS troops began rounding up their family, friends, associates, and even themselves, and transporting them somewhere else forcefully. Guns were pointing at the innocent, the disabled were killed, and the civilians had been made enemies of the state. This was the worst human rights violation in the Northern Hemisphere history, causing a shockwave around the world. One recent journalist said, "I couldn't believe what I heard or even what I saw. I saw the dead shaking their heads, symbolically, as death himself stood beside me. I crossed my hands to my chest and released my cries onto the earth, softening the soil and moisturizing their bodies." Soon after, a majority of foreign powers globally intervened in the massacre. Nations like Leotuva and Senrisa will lead the charge in liberating the Wyvern as free Wyverns would raise up militarily. The war was tough for all involved, with everyone utilizing guerrilla warfare in some way or form at one point in the war. However, the coalition ultimately came out on top in the Battle of the Gorgoil River. I shall drive into their military genius. The Leotuvans had pontoon bridge across the river, capturing the city of Gorge. The Senrisan forces had followed behind them, with them spreading across the front. The plan was for the Senrisans to meet up with the Wyvern army in the north. The only issue was a large Amphine force in the center of these two fronts. With these forces, the Amphines tried counterattacking the Leotuvans across the river. However, with help from the Kailuran volunteers, they were able to barely hold the city of Gorge. In the north, Wyvern guerrillas advanced into the countryside while inciting rebellions behind major supply lines. The battle had already lasted a week, with the Wyverns and coalition forces finally linking after all that time. With the city of Gorge finally secured forever, the coalition brought in light armored divisions to push back the Amphines, which caused the full collapse of the Amphine army. The Amphine economy had already been in free fall, but with the army retreating and the command structure collapsing, Evan Feirig, the leader of Amphine, fled the country and was ultimately killed later on. Conclusively, this war showcased the first instance of the Senrisan military genius under the new regime, showing that they were upcoming superpower and that they would go on to rival Orania. But for Leotuva, Their strength, morale, and courage had brought their men to the hearts of many wyverns. After the war, many pieces were proposed, but eventually the Federation was reformed.